What is good, everyone? This is your host, Deanna Raduescu with Label Free Podcast. To live your best life, you must live label free. As always, bring you incredible guests from all over the world, so sit back, relax, and tune in. My next guest is a mother of 7. Yes, a mother of 7 who fought a 25-year-long battle with severe binge, purge anorexia. She's also a qualified therapist specializing in eating disorders. Please welcome Scarlett O'Connor. Scarlett, welcome to the show.
Hello, thanks for having me here. Good to be on.
Oh my goodness, a mother of 7. So I'm the oldest of 5. So, and my mom's the middle of 6. So I was raised in a very large family dynamic, which I absolutely love. I mean, I can't even imagine what it's like. I mean, you look fantastic.
Thank you very much. It's heaven and hell in my family. We go from one extreme to the other without any kids, but you know, the dynamic can be amazing or difficult.
Yeah, makes the holidays interesting, that's for sure. So I have talked about all kinds of things in the show. I have not ever really dived much into like eating disorders. I know growing up, I know I've had some friends like in high school that battled some of them, you know, they eventually got out of it. And so I know that always stems from somewhere very deep and painful. So I kind of want to jump into a little bit of your 25-year-long battle, why it started, when it started, and just kind of like how you overcame that.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, with me, it did start very, very young. So I started off, I had an association with food from a very, very young age. So I had an undiagnosed health condition, and I've also got dyslexia and ADHD. So I had a lot going on in my little mind. And my association with food started very, very young. I learned from about 9 that I could numb my feelings and numb my emotions and kind of control my thoughts by overeating. So I built that attachment. And my disordered eating started off with binge eating. So at a very, very young age, I would binge and binge and binge and binge. So obviously my weight was affected by that, which unfortunately, you know, affected my relationship with my peers and my education. So my eating disorder started at about 9. Started off at 9, and it started with binge eating.
And is that because you had the ADHD and dyslexia?
Yeah, I mean, I had a difficult family dynamic going on, but I had all of those internal things that I was dealing with on my own. And for me, food was a really good way of numbing out and dealing with those feelings. And you find that a lot in eating disorders. It's the different. I don't like the diagnostic criteria for eating disorders. If you like, I passed pretty much through everyone that you could diagnose me with, but they all had a way of dealing with emotions within the body. You know,
Sure. 9 is such a young age to start a kind of disorder. I'm sure at that age you didn't know what you were doing. It was just a way to like self-soothe, right?
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah.
And so where did it go from there? Like what was like the snowball effect from 9 to what?
Literally 38. So what happened with me was obviously my weight was affected, and I was bullied a little bit at school. And as I got older, I made this decision that I wanted to change my body. I grew up with no sense of identity. I couldn't associate myself as a little girl because I felt so unshapely and so out of sync with everybody else, if you like. It was a really unpleasant place to be. I had no sense of self whatsoever. And then when I got into my late teens, I decided I would go on a diet. And this diet turned into anorexia for me. I think I lost 10 stone in the UK, which I think is like 150 pounds or so on this diet. So I literally shrunk rapidly. And what happened was society's attitude towards me changed rapidly. All of a sudden, I was not the ignored fat kid. I hate that word. Overweight child, you know. All of a sudden it was like, wow, you've got this waist and legs and oh, you look amazing, you know, well done, Scarlett. So I wasn't letting that go. I wasn't letting that go. But what I didn't realize at the time is that I was entering into, obviously it's a mental health condition. Not everybody gets eating disorders. I had that, you know, root issue laid down in childhood, but I was getting into an addiction.
Yeah.
because when you're starving, your brain chemistry is getting messed up, etc., etc. So mental health issue going on, addicted to the dieting, addicted to the anorexia. And then what happened with a lot of people. I see it with a lot of clients now. I physiologically tipped myself over. Sorry. There's only so much starvation a human body can take, right? We're programmed to eat
Right.
when we start. Like you have a long day, you don't eat all day.
Yeah.
You come home, you eat too much, right? Because
Yeah.
you didn't eat today. So I physiologically tipped myself over into a binge one day, absolutely horrified, went and purged, and my way of purging, there is a lot of different ways of purging within eating
Yeah.
disorders, but
Yeah.
for me, it was making myself sick. So
Yeah.
that's where my journey, if you like, the start point of my bulimia was. I think I was 19
Oh,
at that. And unfortunately, it felt like I'd found a reset button.
yeah.
Yeah. So it was kind of like the control element that I had before. Everybody was congratulating me. I changed my body. I had a figure. Um, all of a sudden, I had this way of no longer having to keep that tight, rigid control on myself. I could eat and purge. And what happened was, obviously, it spiraled into an addiction. The binges got bigger, the purges got bigger, and it went from there, unfortunately, which is what happens to so many people. And at the start, it's kind of like you've got this mastery.
Yeah.
You've had this weight problem, had this issue, always trying to deal with it, and then suddenly, boom, you have this way of dealing with it, which is obviously awful and unhealthy and painful. But at the time, I actually felt like I'd discovered some kind of mastery over myself and over the problems that I had. And that's where it began. Yeah. No, at 19, right up to 38, it was real severe, really,
That's
really severe.
Yeah, that's awful. So I had a
Yeah.
girlfriend in high school. I remember going over to her house and she would have a big bowl that she was throwing up in. She took Ipecac syrup to throw up into.
Okay. Well, lethal. Yeah, the cat. Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
so, like, and I knew I had other girlfriends that would take laxatives to keep themselves lean. I personally just worked out. I would go to the gym during lunch. I would go to the gym after school, because when we're in our teenage years, we're all looking for that acceptance, right? We all want to feel beautiful and want to feel like, just, yeah, accepted, right? I mean, high school is such a volatile time. I mean, I was such a nerd up until like my senior year because I always was wearing very fashionably like different types of clothes, and I would get made fun of, and I didn't care. I was like, I remember getting into a fight with one of the guys in our like one of our assemblies. I was like, you know, but I had girlfriends that struggled with some of that stuff, and I guess what I didn't know, like I asked her, like, does your mom and dad see like what you're doing? Like, did your parents see what was going on with you?
Yeah, but no, not with me, no. And what tends to happen is there's kind of like a divided point there where some people will just be, maybe in their teens they'll adopt these habits to be slim or to look nice, etc., etc. But for me, it became, like I said, an addiction, but it was also a form of self-harm.
Yeah.
Like my self-esteem was so low. I had no sense of identity. I completely and utterly I had body dysmorphia. What I saw was not what the rest of the world saw. So I hear you. People get involved in those kind of behaviors to lose weight or to fit in. But some people, it becomes a way of coping with life in general. Like with me, it just literally took over everything.
Yeah.
It was a way of self-harming, but it was also a way of dealing with every single emotion that I had, every single situation, every single thing that happened in life was numbed out by me and to sort out. And unfortunately, it took over my life. It took my
Right.
career,
Yeah.
isolated me beyond, and the shame attached to it as well. You kind of you withdraw from life.
How were you able? I mean, maybe this is a sensitive question, but how were you able to have 7 children having that issue, those disorders, or the?
Yeah, I mean, birth control doesn't work super well when you're throwing up all the time. Not gonna lie.
Right. Say that again?
I see birth control doesn't work super well when you're purging, and I mean, I don't know how I had my 4 eldest when I was actively bulimic, and I was at a very low body weight. I don't know how I even felt pregnant, but as I mentioned before, the nature of eating disorders is different for everybody, right? And they change from how they start. They're fluid. Food doesn't go away; it changes all the time. So with me, it was a form of self-harm.
Yeah.
So when I fell pregnant, I was able to ease up a little on myself. I have no shame now. I've recovered. I've forgiven myself. Luckily for me, I have healthy children, but it was a form of self-harm. And when I had somebody else to think about on board, literally, I was able to ease up on myself, be a little bit more careful. I studied nursing, so I thought I had the knowledge, right? I thought I
Yeah.
could just, do this and that. Luckily for me, I did gain weight and I did have good weight babies.
Good.
But I also had sickness in pregnancy, but I missed out on a lot of time for my kids.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie.
Did your
Lit-
your husband know that you were battling these
That
issues?
was my that was my next sentence. So I find that in practice now, and when you have an eating disorder of that velocity, for whatever reason, whatever disorder you have, for whatever it is, there's always going to be enabling structures around to support it, right? You can't be that sick and carry on functioning in life without ways of coping.
Yeah.
I'm not saying everybody involves other people, but personally, I turned my husband into an unwilling enabler. So I would, I was in the grips of addiction. I had a mental health crisis going on, and I would literally emotionally coerce him. You have to get me the food, because if you don't, everyone will find out. And then, it was so terrible for me. You have to take the children out. I don't want them to see. So I kind of pulled him into this enabling structure where he would, take the kids away, etc., etc. Luckily for me, my health condition was diagnosed by that point, so I was able to hide behind it, which was another part of my enabling, which continued the disorder. Mummy's ill, mummy's got Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, mummy's not well. I missed out on years and years and years of those kids.
Wow.
It's so hard. I've had to work so hard on self-forgiveness, and
Yeah.
like he would take them out, and I wasn't there, you know?
Well, let's talk about the healing, like the aha moment, like the come to Jesus moment, because obviously you've worked on yourself and you're better, right? Could you consider yourself
I mean,
healed? You consider yourself healed? Yeah.
it's a really confident. I have this a lot, and people say, "Are you really confident that I am 100% recovered?" Which is a really, really, really strong statement to make
Yeah.
after any addiction. But we're pushing 10 years now, and I am completely not recovered. But I had to get to absolute crisis
Yeah.
to even begin to recover. I tried every single modality that I possibly could, that was available to me in the UK on the NHS. I tried everything. I spent thousands of pounds. I think I got to the nature of the addiction is so strong that within the first I think even 10 years, I was able to ignore the effect it was having on my body. I was able to
Yeah.
push it aside because my brain chemistry I was so hooked on the ups and downs of the dopamine, of the binging and the purging, etc., etc. But when I did start to try and recover, it was impossible. Nothing worked. But what happened was I got, unfortunately, into a place where my body weight got so low, and I got so ill that I was admitted. And now that was frightening. Okay, so I'm taken away from my children, I'm taken away from my husband, put into a place where they're potentially going to put tubes into me, etc. And I was vomiting blood at that point. I was dangerously underweight. And I had to make a decision. I literally had to make a life and death decision. And I literally chose life. That was it. It was a life and death thing. But I had to get to that point. It had to get that critical for me.
Yeah.
For me to, make that decision. And it wasn't easy.
No, I can't imagine that it would be, because just watching my friends and just kind of understanding like how we think as women, just getting into that, like we rely on that habit or that, like something that we feel that we have control over, and then it spins out of control because you can only do that so long before, as you said, you have, long lasting effects and you need help. So, were you a therapist at this point? When did you become a therapist?
Well, you know what? I did my psychology degree when I was ill. I had a thing about studying. Because I left school at 13, so I had this obsession with my self-esteem was so low. So I need to do A levels, and I need to get degrees, and I need to study. But no, I wasn't a therapist then. But one thing I didn't mention was, and one thing that I had to deal with in recovery is when you have an eating disorder, you have this constant voice.
Yeah.
You have this constant mind chatter in your mind. It's there all the time. It's one of the biggest in my practice right now that I have to deal with is dealing with this voice. So when I got to this crisis point and went and at this recovery time, what I had to do was, and it really, really wasn't easy, I had to separate myself from my eating disorder. And I had to actually realize that I am Scarlett who has an eating disorder, who has this voice. I am not a bulimic anorexia. It just does not make sense. It had to come from that place. And that was the start of my recovery, was working with that voice, separating myself from it. But it was extremely difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. That little man likes to talk shit to you up there and lives up there and makes shut him up.
Yeah, and we all have them. We all have them. And but with eating disorders, it almost becomes like an auditory hallucination. You know, like when I work with clients now, it's borderline whether or not you could diagnostically say that it is an auditory hallucination. It's such a strong voice, and it kind of builds as the disorder builds. And during recovery, that was the first thing that I had to do. But I think I got so sick that I didn't have a choice. I had to separate myself from it. And that's exactly what I did. I flipped it around and looked at everything that I tried to do and did the opposite.
That's awesome.
Right.
Congratulations on getting recovered. And, you look beautiful. You're gorgeous.
Yeah, thank you.
So, I mean, I would have never thought that you struggle with that. So you didn't always specialize in eating disorders with your therapy?
No. So when I first went into recovery, I worked with a modality called emotional freedom technique, which I still absolutely love. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's tapping, the tapping technique.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely love that. So I worked with multiple traumas, whatever came to me, I would work with, which was fabulous. Really enjoyed it. But what I've done now is I use my method of recovery, which is kind of controversial. It isn't the regular way that people go into recovery. I am not a great believer in re-traumatizing. I don't work in the past. I like to look at what's happened. This is what I did with myself. This is how I got myself from the edge of brink of death, quite literally, was to stop going backwards, stop re-traumatizing, stop focusing on this is why I have the eating disorder, this is why it continues. And it's kind of what I was like as a therapist, to be honest, with everything. It's kind of like, we know we have trauma, we know we have an issue because it manifests mentally, it manifests physically, with everything and everybody.
Yep.
But what I tend to do is look at how that manifestation is happening in the now, and then kind of work in the moment with the symptoms, with the reactions within the body, with whatever it is that's going on. It's kind of like not reopening the wound.
Yeah.
It's looking at how things are right now and addressing it there and then.
In the moment. I like that. I think that's probably more effective than going back. I mean, I think for some people to go back and feel certain things is probably good, but I'm the same mindset. Like, let's just move forward. I want to deal with what's happening right now.
The shame, the shame with an eating disorder treatment, right? And it's the same with a lot of therapists. It's kind of like, why do I need to go and recount, how many times do you purge? First of all, you need to be diagnosed. So you need to fit into a box.
Yeah.
You need to have purged a certain amount of times. You need to tell me this, to write this down. And what a horrendous thing for everyone to go through, right? The amount of times I went into an office and I was sick X amount of time. No, there shouldn't be that shame in recovery. And that's kind of what I had to do with myself, was move away from all of that. I need to, and that's how I work as a therapist. Like, if somebody comes to me and says, I was abused as a child, we don't need to we know now. Okay. Yeah. If they want to go exclusively into it, it's the same with the eating disorder. We can talk about it if you want to, but generally people don't, because they know about their trauma. Right. We know why we're sick. We know why we're hurting. We know what's happening to our bodies. Right. What we need to do is go forward. So I kind of like created a future rather than fixated on a past. And that's what I do with my clients now. We remember our future.
Yes. I love.
That's sounded kind of patronizing.
No, not at all. I love that because I feel
When I come from, yeah,
a lot of therapists like to focus on the past. I mean, because I've gone through a lot of therapy. I've had a lot of trauma in my life, and I've talked about it very openly on the show and on other shows. But I personally like to think about like how I can, change my life now and into the future because you can't change the past. What's done is done. And if you continue to think about it and like dwell on it, it's only going to live in the present, right? If you let it die, it stays in the past, and you move forward into in a healthy way into the future.
and we're fluid, right? Our emotions are
Yes,
fluid, and the thing about food is this isn't a substance that we can withdraw from and give up. And our relationship with food is always going to be fluid. It's always going to change. We can't remove it, so we've
yeah,
got to kind of be it with us. And I like the word destructure. When I look at this is what I did with my own behavior. I had to kind of destructure. I had to be very, very honest with myself, which was
yeah,
difficult. And when I work with clients, sometimes I can't work with people because they're not ready, and they're not ready to admit that actually we need to be very frank and look at what's happening, because what I did by myself. What are you doing in your life right now that's enabling you to carry on with this behavior? And then we kind of destructure. So I do have people come, and I just think you're not at that. You need to
right,
be at that point where, because if you don't, you've got to address it. There's no getting away with it or getting out of it with eating disorders. But people do have to be ready, and I was ready. Most definitely,
yeah.
I was most definitely ready.
And so now you've moved into specializing with working with clients that have eating disorders. Is that a new thing, or have you always worked with people like that?
Obviously, when I gravitated, when I worked in general practice, I found that I worked really well with men who had childhood sexual abuse. We kind of get niched. We're all good at different things.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know why, but I was very, very good with that. I was also very, very good with food, and that's because of my lived experience. And it's like I always say, you can't, certain things you can't learn from a book. If I gave you a piece of paper and I wrote down, this is have to smile, you'd be like, what? What? Hang on, this is going to take me a while to learn.
Yeah,
Do you mean? So it's like I've got that lived experience.
yeah,
And that, I feel like that gives me, it's not like I say to the client, hey, me too.
yeah,
That's massively inappropriate. But it's just that I have that, I know what it's like to have that voice. I know what it's like to have my head down the toilet for 6 hours a day and be so ashamed. And I don't have that shame. And I feel like sometimes when I tell my story, I allow other people not to
feel
shame
yeah.
me that shame, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
telling your story allows other people to be more accepting of themselves because then they feel like they're not alone. And that's like the whole reason why I started the show, because, I think that it's important to share stories like yourself, like you just got yourself out of that box and are like living dynamically and have created something from your own experience, which I just absolutely love. With that being said, where can people find you, connect with you, and learn more?
I have my website, scarletto'connor.coach. I do like to do fairly hefty calls. So it's not a quick thing. We have to have a nice long chat.
Yeah.
But you can book in calls and we can have a good long chat about where you are and what your goals are and where you want to be. So you can find me there. And I have a Facebook page as well. But yeah, the website is the best place to just book in a call and have a talk and see where we go. I do offer some funded spaces sometimes, but those conversations can happen.
Yeah.
So book in a call if you need me, we can have a talk. But like I said before, people have to be in the right place. They have to be ready. I'm not the kind of person that's just gonna say, this is how much you're gonna me each week. This is my old therapy timer right here. I'm going to turn this up for an hour and you're going to leave. It doesn't work like that. If you're coming in, then we're going to get better. It's happening.
I love that. You're coming in, you're going to get better. With that being
You're
said, guys,
leaving well. You're going to your big experience.
I love it. I'm going to put her links in the show notes. So if you aligned with Scarlett's message and what she's been through and you feel like you need some help and you're ready for that help, don't hesitate to click that link and schedule a call with her. Like she said, she's ready to talk to you and see if you're ready and if she can help you. This is the part of the show where I like to ask for last words of wisdom or advice. What would you like to leave with us today?
I would like to leave you with the one bit of advice I always sort of want to quickly say is whenever you approach anybody with an eating disorder, if it's someone you love, even if you're approaching yourself, remember initially that that eating disorder has a voice, a distorted, disordered voice. And when you're communicating with somebody who you love, or even communicating with yourself, as crazy as it sounds,
Yeah.
you have to separate yourself from that voice, or you have to understand that that person you love is going to push back straight away because that part of the disorder is going to speak to you first. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
No, it makes total sense. I love it.
Yeah,
Well, Scarlett,
it's better than honest.
thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And we're so happy that you've recovered and now you're out there trying to help people. As you can see, my dogs are like, if you guys
I'm so distracted. Yeah.
they are playing here in the background, but I love your story. We'll have to have you back and you can let us know how many people that you're helping and bring some more great words of wisdom for those that are out there that are struggling
So
with
much.
disorders
Yeah.
like this. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me on. Thank
You're
you.
you're welcome. You guys, this is your host, Deanna Raduescu with Label Free Podcast. To live your best life, you must live label free. As always, don't forget to subscribe, follow, rate, review, comment, share, all those good things. And I'll be back soon with more dynamic guests.